now streaming on Max. It was very briefly in theaters. I really wanted to see this in the theater, and I just missed the short window I had to see it. And this is Clint Eastwood's latest film, Juror number 2. Now, there was some furor about this movie that I'll talk about a little bit later, but this is what this film is. PG-13 and not incredibly long. It's just a very, very easily digestible film. Stars Nicholas Hoult as a reluctant juror on a murder case who realizes as the trial begins that he has more knowledge than he thought going into this case, and maybe more involvement in this case than he thought he did going in. It's an interesting what would you do, or an interesting, it almost feels like an Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode. It's a moral tale. It's a thriller. It's a suspense film. It's a what is Hoult going to do about his involvement in this case? Will he confess? Will he let the people engaging in the trial know what's going on? Will he try to sway the outcome of the trial? It's one of those kind of things. I thought it was decent. I didn't think it was that great. Now, when this was about to be released, it was found out that Warner Brothers was not going to release this in theaters, or was releasing it in a very small number of theaters. And there's something about internet film fans who just are ready to rally around a film that they think is getting the short end of the stick, even if they haven't seen the film. Now, I watched the film and I look at it and I'm like, I don't know, in a theater, if I had paid money to see this in a theater, would I have liked this more or less? To me, it feels like the kind of film that your parents would watch on TNT early one evening, and they'd say, oh, we watched Juror number 2, and you'd be like, oh, how was it? And they'd be like, oh yeah, it wasn't bad. That's kind of how I felt about Juror number 2. It was a little cheesy at times. It was the cast is good. You've got Nicholas Hoult. You've got Toni Collette as the lawyer, the prosecuting attorney, and you have J.K. Simmons as another juror on this jury. But some of the dialogue was a little silly. Some of the performances were a little bit silly. Certainly well made and competently made. I mean, Clint Eastwood knows how to make a movie. I get choked up when I talk about Clint Eastwood. But overall, it almost feels like the kind of a movie, I'm going to go with this. It almost feels like the kind of a situation where it would have worked better if it was made like in the 60s or 70s. It feels, I mean, Clint Eastwood is not a young man. And sometimes when filmmakers get older, the sensibilities that they had in their core years don't feel in sync with the times when they do something now. I've seen this with other filmmakers where what would have worked when they were in their prime just is out of step with what an audience expects now. Now, if you're a fan of older movies, this may work for you. I'm a huge fan. That's predominantly what I watch is older movies. But at times you watch something like this and you're just like, oh, that dialogue would have worked great in the 12 Angry Men era. But hearing that dialogue now, it just seems forced. It seems a little stagey. And that performance aspect seems a little silly, or that plot twist seems a little silly compared to what it might have been if this was a studio picture from 1965 or something like that. And that's kind of how I felt about Juror number 2. I went in completely blind. All I knew is that Nicholas Hoult was in it. Apparently a trial was involved, and that it was a Clint Eastwood movie that people were really upset wasn't playing everywhere. I don't fault the studio for doing what it did with this movie, because I don't think it would have done that well in theaters. And I think, all of the money they spend to advertise a film, I was reading the other day when you'd spend like double the budget to advertise a lot of films, theoretically, if you want a big hit. They were looking at the dollars and cents, and it probably made more sense to just put it on streaming than to put it in theaters. And all these people, people were making T-shirts that were like tour shirts that defiantly listed all the theaters where this movie was playing. And I'm just like, so all of you who are all upset about that, making the T-shirts and wanting to burn down Warner Discovery, have you watched the movie? Was it worth that? Because I thought it was decent, it was fine, but I don't see it as this kind of thing to start going nuts about. Like, I like Clint Eastwood movies. For the most part, everything of his I've seen, just about all the movies I've seen of him, sort of like good quality. Even better usually when he's in them. But this one to me was just like, if he had made this movie for TV, if he had made this for Netflix, we would have been like, oh wow, he's making movies for Netflix now. And it would have kind of felt more on par with that level of film than a theatrical film. So anyway, your mileage may vary. I didn't think it was that great. I thought it was fine. I thought it was decent. It held my interest throughout. I kind of wished it went deeper into some areas than it did, but I didn't think it was this travesty of justice that this film didn't get a theatrical release. And what does it matter anyway? Because you're probably watching this. I saw it streaming. From now on, from this day forward, everybody's going to see it streaming. That's just where, unfortunately, everything goes to live forever unless you're a super classic that gets theatrical release again. Anyway, I ramble. Juror number 2, now on Max. Let me know what you thought of it.